So I had a question this morning from someone asking if I'd done a video yet on how to do ESteps calibration. I thought, well, no, I have not. So I gave them a written description, but why not? Use the opportunity, as they say. When it strikes, there we go, a little bit straighter. So I'm going to do a quick demonstration. Quick, he said. Yeah, a few minutes, you know me. So this is my demo screen, right? That's the little connector that I use to plug it in, just so that the camera can see what's going on the menus. These are the tools you're going to need. One Sharpie pen in a contrasting color to the filament that you're going to work with. White works really well. This is marble white, and it makes it very easy to see the marks. You're going to need calipers. Now, I'm using digital ones because people get fascinated with numbers and decimal places, but truly, you don't need to be extremely precise with this. There's only so many significant figures that you can measure with. So I'm going to use the digital one anyway. Mine's a little bit flaky, so I may have to correct it on the video in real time. And you're going to need a pair of snips just at the beginning and the end, so that we can figure out how to isolate that piece of filament. But at the beginning, I'll show you. Here, we'll take it now. I watched a guy reviewing a printer the other day, and he was baffled by an error message, or at least he pretended to be, where the filament wasn't feeding through the extruder and the error screen says cut filament. And he's going, what do you mean cut the filament? Why would I cut a filament? So here's what I think those guys were talking about. Let's get some contrast here. When you have your filament and it's blunt on the end and you try to push it into an extruder, the edges of this sometimes get caught on the inside channel and you can't push it in. So ooh, and it's just like a slinky when you let go, it springs. So, hold that down here. It's a little bit stiff here. It's kind of wet. It's marble white PLA, and it's been a while since I put it away. So you take your snips, and you take the end of that, and you cut on an angle. See that? It's not straight. Can you see that? Yeah. So you cut it on an angle, so that you're left with a point. And that'll be much easier to feed into the extruder. Now, I am not running a stock CR6 SE. I'm so happy with it, I'm not willing to put it back to stock, even for videos for yourselves, so you'll have to bear with me here. I'll take you on a quick tour. What you're looking at there, I can post a link. I'll post a link in the description, because at K2Van, one of our Discord community members, seems to be making a bit of an amateur career on these things. These are a design he has agonized for hours and hours to perfect. The Fusion 360 models are available on printables.com. It's truly a marvelous solution to a problem. I wanted to use a Dragon high flow hot end on my printer, and there was no way of installing it until he created this mount. So buried under all that plastic is a mount and a hot end that is a Dragon HF hot end. On top of that is a direct drive motor by Moons, and it is normally bolted to the assembly, all one piece. This is a cooling fan. This is the daughter board mount with a cable mount grip. So I have unbolted this so that I can get at it, because what I like to do when I do ESteps is I like to do straight through the extruder, nothing else in the circuit. I'm an electrical engineer, I think, in terms of circuits. So the filament path would normally pass through the extruder, through that little white tube, down to the hot end, out through the nozzle. And if I measured flow, that would have the whole thing connected. But to do ESteps, it's just this we're asking about. It's how many steps do we tell the motor to turn to extrude 1 millimeter of filament, whether it's coming out the bottom end or not. As soon as it's coming out here, it's extruding in that terminology, right? So we want to make sure that we have this motor steps calibrated correctly. If the hot end and the circuit here cannot put so much drag on the filament that it can't actually feed at the rate the motor is capable of, there's something wrong. On a stock extruder, the extruder may not be strong enough to overcome drag and resistance forces. So yes, the stock extruder may even start clicking if you try to flow at a certain rate. The Moons motor is just so strong, and the Dragon HF is so good at melting, that for the most part that's not the case here. I can drive into any resistance that I have in the rest of that channel as long as I don't have a clog. But the extruder itself, steps per millimeter is what the software is asking, and then flow rate, percentage flow, and so on for good quality finish is a separate question and a separate parameter. See, I knew this wasn't going to be a short video. So I've disconnected this just so we can watch the filament come out the bottom. It'll also allow me to emulate what you guys with Bowden's may be working with, where you're back here, you would have your extruder mounted and the filament would be coming out here. Okay, so I've taken the filament now and I've pushed it in the little white tube I have at the top here, in through the pneumatic connector, up against the gears. And with this particular motor, all I have to do is push a little bit and I can get the filament in between the gears and it's coming out the bottom. Yeah? So I can push and pull. That's where my extruder is going to feed the filament into free air. This is called the free air method for ESteps calibration if you're going on YouTube and looking for better resources. So I have the filament just flush to the bottom here. In fact, now that it's through, I can afford to cut it a second time. So to account for tolerances and so on, take your flush cutters and cut that filament flush at where it's coming out. Now you know you're going to run your test, it's going to extrude X amount of filament, you're going to cut that off again exactly the same way, and we've taken away any concern about is that really flush or not, because it's simply the same place I cut it last time. That'll make sense when you play this back. So I have my extruder primed now. If you're on the Bowden setup, you'd have your extruder facing this way. Do the same thing. You can leave the pneumatic connector in place, doesn't matter, just wherever you cut it flush in a way that you think you can repeat, so that you can actually measure what came out later and check your ESteps against it. Right? So now I have it ready to go. I don't want this to fly away, so I'm just going to have to hold it here while I do the work. I'm going to adjust my camera. Again, your filament path will be different from mine. I have my reel mounted on top of the bar, so I feed straight down into my extruder for the most part. I'm trying to relieve tensions that influence the gauge. What you would do now is take your calipers, get them in the frame, Steve, there we go. Take your calipers, and we're going to use that little probe on the end of the caliper, because that's the easiest way to register against the filament. So we want to power this guy up, zero him out. Have to insist a little bit. This guy is a bit flaky. He doesn't stay at zero when I tell him to. Now I can dial in, let's say 120. You see mine's a little bit flaky. There we go, 120. It's going to look like that on yours. It's going to stay that way on mine, more or less. And lock it. I really don't think the 0.01 is going to make any difference to my math, and I don't want to be here all day tuning that. So what we're going to do now is take this end of the caliper. This probe is now that long, 120 millimeters long. I'm going to take this Sharpie thing, take the top off. That Sharpie thing. We're going to hold this probe at the inlet. We're going to pull this filament so that she's more or less straight. See, it's a little bit kinky. Right, more or less straight against the probe. And then we're going to take that pen that we're daubing on the things. We're going to stick him here. And we're going to measure that line. Okay, so the top of that line is 120. That's how I knew the 0.01 wasn't going to make much difference. Top of that line is 120. I can put the cap back on my pen before I paint myself with it. And my extruder and my marked filament are ready to go. The filament will be coming out the bottom, so I just don't want to point that at anything where it's going to become a problem. Let's see if I move my camera one more time now. We'll let you see everything at once. Back up a little bit. There. One extruder with a filament going to come out the bottom. One main menu, go to Calibrate. And on the calibration menu, you will find ESteps calibration, the button in the middle there. Press that. And this is the questionnaire. Okay. On this screen, which now says across the top, ESteps calibration. Down here it says current steps, that's what's programmed in now. So you might be looking, say, at 93 if you have a stock Bowden and you're looking at the stock configuration file. You have how much do you want the tool to extrude. In this case, 100 is a nice round number. It kind of works out nicely. If you're 1 millimeter off, you're only 1% out on your steps. And it's an economical amount to be spending. Where did I put my mark? I put my mark at 120. If you put yours somewhere different, just tap on that field, type in a different number. Always press the red X, you change your mind. At what temperature do you want to do this test? Now, if I was going to run this test through the hot end, that number would matter. So the software is programmed up with that condition. But if I'm not going to run it through there, it really doesn't matter what number I pick, right? I may as well pick a number that won't take long to get to, because it's not going to make any difference. The filament's not going through the hot end. It will nonetheless wait until it gets to the temperature I asked for before the next step. So I've got a button there that says push down at the bottom here, run the extrusion. So we say go. Sorry, parallax is there we go. One throbber. I'll move you down now so you can see. Temperature at the bottom was already at 200 and something. I've been messing around. So we're waiting for it now to get down to 190. You got the heating up message. Sort of tells you on that message line what's going on. The throbber promises you things are still happening. Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I'll speed this up on playback. Okay, so now it says extruding. And if we turn to the extruder, there, very slowly, trust me, it is happening. The extruder is feeding out filament. Put it against a black background, you'll be able to see it really is extruding. Don't you wish load unload filament ran at that speed? Up at the top is my mark, slowly approaching the inlet where I measured from. It will stop short. Spoiler alert, I know it's not going to run out 120 millimeters filament. That's the reason you pick such a big number, really, is to give yourself lots of slop on E-step in case they are too high. It's still going. When this extrusion process is finished, the tool will change screen. It'll challenge you to measure how much filament there is now between that original registration mark at the top of the inlet and that black Sharpie mark, which, as you recall, this time I drew underneath the caliper, so it'll be at the top of that mark is the 120. And there you go. So you got a beep to alert you that the system has finished. It wants to know how much filament is remaining, and what it's talking about is remaining between, say, the top of that registration mark and the tip of the inlet where we measured it going in the first time. We originally said 120. Now what I can do is measure from the top of that mark. Try not to be so slow getting it done. So the downside of digital things, they have batteries. So 2431. There it is. 2430 more or less. So that's what's left. That's what I've measured from the inlet mark to the Sharpie mark that's disappeared off screen. That one there. Filament remaining 24.3. And we enter that, 243.4, and it says poof, there's your new steps. 692.8. 692.8. Okay, so apply. Now it's good to go. My new ESteps value saved is confirmed at the message line. Alright. You'll notice it still says 190 because this function left the hot end switched on. You might want to go back if you're done with the printer for a while. You may want to go back here and do a cool down under prepare cool down, and that will turn your heater off. Right? Cool down was there. So I need to back out a bit so you guys can see what I'm doing. Now I was showing you two methods at once, so that's the way the tool's designed. You take those flesh cutters now and you come in at the bottom just like last time. Never mind the slant on it right now, we just cut it straight. And now we're going to measure how much actually extruded. It should be the same amount, right? So we set this to 0. We open it up and we lay our extruded piece of filament in. Hold it up against the calipers, close it up. 97.4. I asked for 100, I got 97.4. So my steps were not high enough. So we go into Calibrate menu. Second button is ESteps calibration. And this is the screen. It tells me that my current ESteps, in this case, is I'm using an orbiter and it's a highly geared extruder, takes 692.8 steps last time I measured this to push 100 millimeters of filament. So extrude amount, I can change that if I want, but I like 100 millimeters, that's the default. Filament marked at, well in this case I'm going to run the filament out the bottom and cut it off so I don't need to use that mark. The temperature that we're going to extrude at, well, doesn't really matter since the hot end isn't doing any work anyway. Pick a number that's faster to get to. And down here at the bottom it says, well, at the bottom button says run extrusion. So we push that. It will begin by setting our temperature to the temperature we asked for because it doesn't know any better. And it wants to make sure I don't try to extrude through a cold hot end. It would be cool if we could put an enhancement in here, I think, to switch method. It would save us this extra time of waiting for a hot end we don't need. Anytime you're watching it, it's not doing anything, even though it seems to be at least at the temperature you asked for. It's waiting to be within 2 degrees for what it calls a stable period of time. Okay, that's Marlin. Extruding. There's my extruder pushing my filament out. And whatever gets pushed out, I'm going to cut the filament off flush again at the bottom of the extruder. I'm going to measure what was pushed out and I'll know whether my steps are valid or not. Okay, beep says I'm done, so the extrusion now is finished. I don't want to drop my extruder and I don't want to lose that piece of filament. So this is a balancing act with two hands. I've got my snips on the filament. I'm holding both the extruder and the filament Snip. And I didn't drop either of them. This is good. Digital calipers. Push 0. Okay, I strive for 0. I don't always get it with this device, so I think it's getting a little flaky on me. I wanted roughly 100, so if I pull it out that far, there'll be room to put my filament in here. It's bent, it's stiff, and it's a trick to lay it along the side here. So this isn't a lot easier than the other method, but I think it's more precise in the end. So you push your filament flush against the calipers, right? And wherever it came to an end, I can measure that, and it says 101. Some would be happy with 101. Let's pretend, so that I can show you the tool. Let's pretend I'm not happy with 101. I just want to make sure I measure twice and cut once. Yeah, 101. Yeah, 101 is what I'm getting on my calipers. 101 point something. Let's do the whole thing because I want to show you something. 101.64 it says. Okay. So now we go on the screen. How much filament was left? I told it by default that I had marked it at 120. So this tool still thinks that's the question I'm going to answer. So I got 101.61 out. And that was 1.6 too much. So what was left out of 120 would have been 18.4. So 18.4 is what I had left. So I go in here, 18.4 millimeters. It tells me then my new steps ought to be 681.9. So 681.9, if I agree, I say apply. New ESteps value has been saved, it says on the menu, and we're good. Look at that, 100.25. I'm going to argue that's good enough, right? It's good enough. So there's 0 left, but I wanted to show you something that may confound you. And I'm going to use this opportunity. So let's say it's 100.24. And I want to argue that 0.24 is too much. So that would say, when I'm answering this question now on the questionnaire that is presented at the end of the cycle says, how much was remaining? What they're asking is, assuming you looked at the 120 millimeter mark, and you're measuring from the outlet, how much was left over? And it's not minus 0.24. It's 20 minus 0.24. I asked for 100, but I marked at 120. So when I measure to the mark, I'm measuring 20 plus the difference of what from 100. So let's say there's 19.75 left, 19.76. Right? If you wanted to enter that, you'd be out of luck. You can't tell that by looking here. The tool is going to give you a keyboard. Tick. 19.76. Whoa. Well, I missed the 6, I hit the 3 by mistake. But you'll notice it didn't work out, right? I'm trying to say 19.76. Whoop. The tool will only allow me to enter 1 decimal place, but it's quite happy to shove the numbers up by 1. So fair warning, 19, in this case, pick a number 0.8 if we round up, and you type that in and you've got your 19.8. So if I do that other navigation now, if I show you how I can get back to that without rerunning the calibration, I can go Setup, Movement Settings, Extruder. There's my steps. Okay, 680.5 steps under the extruder. I hope that's not too confusing or too much information. If it is, leave me comments and leave me questions. Happy to respond to them at the bottom. If the video served your needs, please remember to subscribe and like if you're not already a member, and I will keep putting out more elements of this series. I've done now the setup, I've done the main walkthrough of everything, I've done today calibration with the ESteps. I will pick up on bed leveling and pit tuning, and then I'll move on to the prepare and the print menus. So lots more to come. Stick around. Talk to you later. Bye bye.